Selamat siang. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Saya nggak menduga bahwa saya akhirnya diminta untuk presentasi atau mengajar di depan teman-teman sekalian. Jadi ini presentasi yang saya persiapkan sebelum saya mulai berbicara bahasa Inggris. Itu agak sedikit first I assume that audiensnya itu mahasiswa S3, jadi yang sudah pernah melihat dynamic static general equilibrium, karena waktu itu rencananya doktoral colloquium gitu. Tapi nggak apa-apa, kita coba pelan-pelan. Okay, so this is the English part. Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for having me here. I'm here as you can say as a guest lecturer. My name is M.Ec.Dev. I'm a teaching staff at the Department of Economics, Universitas Gajah Mada. Jadi Pak Tri itu dulu dosen saya, sekarang colleague. Alhamdulillah, I'm a Ph.D. student. I'm a fourth-year Ph.D. student at North Carolina State University. I'm doing economics. I've been doing research for about 8 to 9 months, and my research is mainly on macroeconomics, fiscal policy. So I'm going to show you what a dynamic stochastic general equilibrium looks like. I prepared some papers that me and my advisor used to base our research from. So, okay, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll be happy to answer you directly. Okay. This is my dissertation. My dissertation consists of 3 essays. And each essays are talking about fiscal policy in the open economy macro framework. And I'm doing macroeconomics. I'm doing a lot of simulations on the model, which I will show you later. But the first paper that I'm going to present is actually not a part of my dissertation. It's actually a project which my advisor proposed to me around 2 months ago. She was like, okay, you're doing your dissertation, but I have this project, you want to do it with me? So I said, like, yeah, why not? I mean, it's kind of cool to write with your professor, right? Just write something and then they write like 20 things. But yeah, so the first one is actually, it's an extension of her paper. So she wrote a paper with her advisor. It's been revised and resubmitted at American Economic Reviews. But she was like having this kind of curiosity. You know, she's like, when she wrote that paper, she was like, what is actually fiscal multiplier? If you look at the literature, there are lots of definition of fiscal multiplier. So the first paper that I'm going to present to you is actually, it's called a primer on fiscal multiplier definitions. So that's the first paper. The idea of this paper is actually, it's a survey paper. Usually when you have a survey paper, survey all the papers within the literature. We talk about unconventional monetary policy. That survey paper would consist of lots of paper, and then that paper would review what is the model and what is the data and stuff like that, what's the estimation methods. But what we're going to do here is a survey methods. It's a survey paper for a DSG model, so dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. We have built a large-scale DSG model with a lot of fiscal policy detail in it, and it's a nested model. What is a nested model? A nested model is that you have system of equations of 70 equations, 80 equations, and then you want to switch from a features, for example, flexible price, to fixed price, or say you want to go from RBC to new Keynesian model, you could switch the parameters on and off. That's what they call a nested model. So the idea was really simple. If you look at the literature of fiscal multiplier, does anyone know here knows what a fiscal multiplier is? Fiscal multiplier.
The effect of the government spending on the economy. So,
Yeah, the effect of government spending on the economy. Okay, that's partially correct, because when I say fiscal multipliers, you have to define what is the fiscal policy. There's a lot of type of fiscal policy. There's a tax, you have consumption tax, you have labor tax, you have capital tax. Government spending, you have a government consumption or government investment. And you have to transfer it to household. So there's a lot of type of fiscal instruments right there. And also you have, like you say, macroeconomic variables. What kind of macroeconomic variables that you have? You know, you can have output, you can have consumption, you can have investment, you can have other types of macro variables. But generally, there are 4 types of multiplier. Okay, the first one is impact multiplier. So the first one is impact multiplier. You can see that that's the ratio of the change in, say for example, this is output to government consumption, for example. If you talk about impact multiplier, say that, okay, that the government consumption ranges now, what is the impact 4 quarters later? So that's the 4 quarter impact. So you see the time subscript is YT plus K. So that's only the change from this period to the 4th quarter. But then you have cumulative multiplier. The cumulative multiplier adds up each amount of multiplier for each period. So for example, you have, you know, what's the impact from the 1st quarter to the 2nd quarter, you add up the 2nd quarter to the 3rd quarter, 3rd quarter to the 4th quarter. That's what we call cumulative multipliers. And then the 3rd types of multipliers in the literature is actually static present value multiplier. It is similar to the cumulative multipliers, but the static present value, if you're talking about present value, means that you discount whatever you have in t plus k, t plus j, t plus j plus 1, t plus j plus 2, or p plus 1 until t plus j, and you discount it back to this present. So it's called present value, and there's 2 types of discounting. The first one is, there's a lot of papers in the literature. If you look at Harold Bulik, he actually prefers the R as in R in steady state, whereas there's the 4th type of multiplier, which is called like dynamic present value multiplier, where you actually use the R. So RT. So the difference between the third one, and the 4th one is actually the 3rd one. It doesn't have a time subscript. The dynamic present value multiplier, it does have time subscript. So you discount with whatever interest rate you have at that time period. Whereas in static, the discount rate is the same every single period. So yeah, it's a, yeah.
What is the symbol of E?
E is expectations, because we don't know what happened in t plus k. So we're using expectation operator there. Yeah. So this is actually what we have in the literature, and we're gonna survey this. So our model is a very huge model. I will show you what we have in MATLAB and how we could go from a, say for example, flexible price case to fixed price case, and so on and so forth. So what is the importance of this paper? Is actually we're pretty ambitious in terms of surveying the literature. she wrote me a couple of weeks ago and she was like, oh, I came up with this list and there was like 90 papers that I have to read till the end of the next month. So yeah, it's gonna be a pretty busy month for me. So Valerie Raby, she's a professor at the UC San Diego. She said that, you know, there has to be some cautions that these, you know, all of these 4 measures that you use would imply different multipliers, right? When you write a paper, which kind of multipliers you want to use is very problematic. You know, you could end up having a very high multiplier when you use the cumulative multipliers, or you know, you could end up having like a very small with the other type of multipliers. So with a, say for example, if we're talking about like applied macro, you have your data, you run your time series, and you come up with a multiplier. When you use the second definition or third definition, it would yield different multipliers. So what we want to see here, what we want to discuss, is that how this alternative measure of fiscal policy behave, and you know, what kind of features that would imply like a big difference in multiplier, and how would we do that? Okay, this is a very, I don't know whether you have seen this before. This is what we call New Keynesian dynamic stochastic general equilibrium model. So this is a general equilibrium model. I don't know whether I should discuss it. Okay, so you know this distinction between macroeconomics and microeconomics, right? One of my friends asked me, like, why are you using macro analysis? Do you believe that, you know, people are rational? Do you believe that, you know, people maximize their utility, subject their constraint, blah, blah, blah? For me, macro and micro, well, it depends on what question you ask. Okay, for something this big, you know, you talk about fiscal multiplier, you can do either, you know, go to each people and ask, or you can use the macro data. And macro data is what we choose here. So what we're going to build is what we call a model economy. So in this model economy, I would get something like intuition. It doesn't mean that I believe that there's only one agent in this world. It doesn't mean that I believe that, you know, everyone behaves the same or everyone is rational. We use macro model to analyze macro questions. And what we're going to use here, how we estimate the parameters, we don't just calibrate and say, okay, I don't know, elasticity of substitution, so consumption is, I don't know, 3, something like that. We would estimate the parameters of the model using Bayesian estimations. So, okay, what is a large New Keynesian DSG model? This is actually pretty difficult because I assume that the students have known this before.
Maybe you can provide some like underlying equation, just like quantitatively.
Okay.
What's the goal of your model?
Okay. What's the goal of my model?
Yeah, like the goal and then the setup, like general setup.
Okay.
So our colleagues, one of our colleagues, very love to talk about New Keynesian synthesis, right? But so Widodo.
Yes.
Is there any difference between New Keynesian and New Keynesian synthesis in your business?
I actually haven't talked to him yet about it. So all of my papers that I'm using here is based on my training during my first year of Ph.D. So New Keynesian DSG model, okay. Well, the first thing that we have to have is a rational expectation model. The second one is that you have to have some frictions, which we have nominal frictions, as price rigidities and wage rigidities. And then the difference between the RBC or neoclassical model with the New Keynesian is that the neoclassical model based everything on the TFP shocks, the total factor productivity shocks. But new Keynesian model, they add some nominal friction as a price rigidities and wage rigidities. So in some sense, that new Keynesian model has fixed price, and RBC has a flexible price case. So I think what the new Keynesian synthesis tries to do is to blend those two. So you have TFP shocks plus you have nominal frictions, which is actually, that's what they teach us in our first year. So our professor never called it like new Keynesian synthesis. But yeah, in this model we do have technological progress shock, TFP shock. We also have nominal frictions as price rigidities and wage rigidities. So,
but RBC, right? Real business cycle.
a real business cycle model?
No, I'm asking.
Have you done real business cycle model?
Microeconomics.
Not yet, in macroeconomics? No?
Microeconomics. Because
Okay. Okay, I'll try it. Okay, I'll try to go very, very slowly. Okay, so macroeconomics is a storyteller. We tell a story with equations. We love equations better than words. We love to tell a story using equation but not words. You tell me to write introduction, I would write 3 pages in 3 weeks. If you tell me to write equation, I would write 80 equations in 1 day. So we try to tell stories through equations. Okay, we talked about macroeconomics model. What is the perfect macroeconomic model? It's the real world itself, right? You have a country of 240 million people. You impose capital tax, you impose income tax, right? How do you model that? How do you model the effect, the change of output when there's a certain change in income tax, for example? That's a fiscal multiplier. One way to do it is to survey people and to ask. When there's tools that we have in macroeconomics that we call a DSG model. So we model this economy, okay? I have this is a story, you might not believe me. Okay, that's a heavy rain. Okay, so the thing is that I haven't thought DSG model before, so this is pretty difficult. Okay, so in my economy, I have agents, right? Let's say that I have an economy and I have an agent from the interval of 0 to 1. This could be anything, you know. And then my agent is an optimizer. Why do I call optimizer? Because this agent maximizes their expected discounted lifetime utility. So this agent doesn't only think about the present, but the future. Tomorrow, he's not only thinking about the present, but he's also thinking about the future. So this is like when you see here, when you see the time subscript that goes from 0 to infinity, means that my agent is infinitely lived agent, and my agents have. So what is the objective function? This agent maximizes the utility. So the UT here is actually his utility function, and his utility function consists of consumption and this utility from working. So this is working and this is consumption. Okay. So when you maximize your utility, you know you're an economic agent. You have to have a constraint. So what is your constraint? So to consume, see, you have to consume, to invest, and to buy bonds, right? They have to work. And they have to work and they earn wages. And then the government imposes tax on the wage. So what the agents have left is 1 minus tau L. So for example, tau L is 0.2. So here you have what you get from working is only 8 from your total hours times wages. So that's your income. So that's your income from working. And then the agents also rent out capital, right? So when you have capital and you rent it to firms, you have interest income from that. It works the same. And then when you buy bonds, you get the payments from the bonds, right? So you have RT there. And then he got transferred from the government, and he also gets a dividend from the firms. So this is his budget constraint. So my savers maximizes his utility subject to the budget constraint that I have here. Yeah. Oh, okay. So why do I have the integration? Why do I have the integration here? It's because we have wage rigidity, and each labor they supply differentiated labor. So there's a type of labor that goes from 0 to 1 in the integration. So this is not the continuous type, but this is the continuous type. So, kalau misalnya ada jenis perbedaan A, jenis pekerjaan yang berbeda. So you integrate over the type of the job, yeah, not the type area. So thank you for the question, because now I also have what we call a non-saver. This is actually not a. This is pretty uncommon in the standard literature of the ESG model, but this is very common in fiscal policy literature because non-savers break the Ricardian equivalence. The marginal propensity to consume for this non-saver is very big. You can see that non-saver doesn't have any access to the capital market. He doesn't save. So he consumes whatever he earns that period. So you can see that on the right-hand side, you have the consumption. So that's a consumption net of the tax. And then on the left-hand side, you have the wages plus the transfer. So this agent doesn't maximize its utility because he just consumes whatever he earns that period. So this savers, the non-savers break the Ricardian equivalence. This is very neat because you can see that in some sense when you want to talk about transfer, once you say you impose tax, you impose income tax agents and you give all of the transfer to these non-savers, the effect would be very big compared to when you only have a savers agent or maximizing agents. So then we have the wage setting. This is also pretty difficult to explain actually just by pointing out something. I'll go to you. Just when in my first year, my professor always comes with a cup of coffee. She always came with a cup of coffee with a lot of sheets, and she would write on the whiteboard for a full 3 hours of equations. So it's very hard to tell you what the equation really means because you need all of the derivations to actually notice what it is. But okay, I'm going to try. So in Newton's and DSG model, we have what we call nominal frictions. Real frictions is the frictions of, for example, capital adjustment costs or investment adjustment costs. Whenever you invest, there's a cost to investing. Here we have what we call nominal frictions. In a perfectly competitive settings, all firms in my economy could reset the price optimally each period. That's what we have in RBC model, right? But in UKG and DSG model, you have what we call a nominal friction. So this is the story. In my economy, I have a firm that goes from interval from 0 to 1, right? But only a fraction of the firms can reset their price optimally. So for example, half of the firms, or a quarter of the firms, or 3/4 of the firms, but not all of them. So that's what creates frictions in the economy. The same as the wages. Not all of the type of labor can reset their wage optimally. And this is the demand-driven model. So labor works. The hours that they work is actually the hours that the firms demand. And in this model, what's interesting about this model is that I assume that in my model, that intermediate goods is being produced not only using labor and capital, but also using public capital. Public capital is a capital that's being provided by the government. So if you see that there's KG over here, that KG is the public capital. So government, through fiscal policy, provide capital for the firms. So it's like, it's highways, harbors, your public infrastructures. With this, public capital is due to public congestion, because you can see that the ratio KG over the intermediate, the output of intermediate firm. So, and how does my this is a production function. You have capital, you have labor, and then you have public capital. So there's 3 inputs of production in this model. And this public capital is being provided by the government. So what does the government budget looks like? So each period, the government, they issue bonds. They get the tax payment from the capital, rental rate of capital here, and then you have they get the tax revenue from labor, wages, and they have the tax revenue from the consumption. And what is so this is the revenue, and this is the spending, right? You have the interest spending, you have a government consumption, you have government investment, and you have transfer. This is the transfer that the government gives to the agents. And then how the investment, the government investment process, we follow this equation where delta G is the depreciation of the public capital. Okay, so this is like the, oh no, this is too much equation, I'm sorry. So this is what we call the fiscal rule. So this is what we call the fiscal rule. So in fiscal rule, you have the government debt to GDP ratio, and this, for example, that if the government raised debt today, they have to something in the future has to respond to that, right? So you can't just, if you raise the debt now and then you cut tax in the future, how are you going to pay for the debt in the future? So this is just like a response rule. So this is what we call a fiscal rule. And we have a lot of fiscal rule here because this is a fiscal policy model. So we try to be more like realistic. So we have 6 fiscal instruments in this model. Okay. So do you know what we call a first order conditions? Have you ever heard about first order conditions? Yeah? But what's the first order condition? How do I get a first order conditions of consumption? If I have a model, if I have a utility function subject to something, how can I get a first order condition of consumption? Yes. So first you formulate the Lagrange. So you take that objective function and constraint, you put it into the Lagrange equations, and then you take the first order condition by taking the partial derivative of the variables that you want to see, right? So for example, I have Savers FOC for consumption. I have DE Savers FOC for capital. It means that I take the partial derivative of the Lagrange multiplier with respect to capital, and I have the investment. This is the budget constraint. And I have wages. I'm not going to tell you what they are because they're just horrible. And then you have the marginal cost. This is the marginal cost from the intermediate firms, and then you have the price level, the price index. You have the aggregate consumption, because in this economy, the consumption will consist of the consumption of savers and non-savers, and mu is the ratio of the non-savers. And then I have the government constraint, I have low motion of the capitals, and then what we call a equilibrium condition, right? So that's the market clearing conditions. So you assume that every market in this economy clears, right? So this is not a solution. You cannot see you cannot see the solution yet from here because you know they're non-linear. So how you get the solution is you take the steady state and then you linearize the model with respect to the steady state value. What is a steady state? Does anyone hear about the steady state? What is a steady state? Yeah? Okay, this is the problem. What is steady state? That's a condition where yt equals yt plus 1 equals yt plus 2. That's not how you describe stuff. But okay, the steady state is a condition where you have no uncertainty, right? You don't have the expectation. You don't have the expectation. You don't have the eating. You don't have expectation operators there, and everything in steady state grows at the same rate. So, for example, consumption grows at the same rate. Output goes at the same rate. If the technological progress grows at the same rate, say for example A grows equals 1 in the steady state, means that we have, say for example, technology is equals 1 in the steady state, means that everything has to grow in the same rate, right? You have CT plus 1 over CT, it has to be equal to 1. So that's why you can just take the time subscript off there. So that's the steady state. And after you have the steady state, you log linearize the system. You use Taylor approximation to linearize all of your equations that you have. Say for example, I have 80 equations. I log linearize everything to get my solution. And how do I get my solution? Is I use what we call a